CleanTech is a critical mineral resource company targeting this fluorspar market and is consolidating the historic Illinois Kentucky Fluorspar District, having acquired and optioned the mineral rights to more than 17,000 acres. CEO John Lee is here to tell us about this little known but very significant U.S. fluorspar mining opportunity. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. Please remember, this is neither a recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. John, thank you for joining us. How are things going?
I'm fine. Thank you for the invite, Martin. And it's my first time to be on your channel, and I'm going to do my best to try to impress your audience of this incredible investment opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think fluorspar is on many people's radar. There are a handful of fluorspar companies out there. It's been, I don't know, hidden by the fact that, A, it's a sizable opportunity, but it's not huge like copper. And then it's been a lesser known one that's been dominated by China that's kind of consolidated the industry over the last couple decades. So why don't you just give us a bit of a background? I've said sort of the high level stuff, but a little more detail, a bit of more of a background on the fluorspar market, its uses, and the opportunity there.
Yeah, certainly. First of all, Martin, I'm just a bit of a background. I have over 25 years of experience in the mining space. First 10 years as a mining investor, just like many of your audience, pulling up a league table, analyzing the resources and ounces in the ground and production revenues, etc. After the financial crisis, I took on the job of being the CEO of Silver Elephant as a hobby, and in 15 years, it's almost like a blink of an eye. It's been a double full-time job and running on the other side of the aisle as a junior mining company executive, having raised well over $150 million, probably close to $200 million through the Toronto Stock Exchange. The company was Silver Elephant, and Elephant was spun out as critical minerals projects in the United States to CleanTech. That's how CleanTech was born 3 years ago. Fluorspar is also relatively new to me, even though I am a specialist in silver and in critical minerals. And it's brought to my attention when I was in an Asian roadshow in Asia, where I was sort of alerted to this opportunity. Kind of like rare earth, fluorspar is now well known in household, but it's critical in empowering functioning world economies. Fluorspar price has gone up more than 400% since its full market started in year 2000, and primarily for two major applications. It is used. The most of it uses for enrichment of uranium to produce the nuclear fuel for nuclear power plants. And then the second one is as a fluxing agent for steel and aluminum plants. I think it's important to give it a primer on what fluorspar is, and that is the most reactive element in the periodic table. And so usually what I say about that is it's kind of like a Victoria's Secret model that even the nerdiest bookworm will be attracted to, and that's why fluorspar reacts to uranium oxide coming out of the ground to form uranium hexafluoride. And uranium hexafluoride is gaseous from which the U-235 is centrifuged or spun out from the U-238. That's the heavier uranium, and U-235 is the fissile uranium of which can then go through that fission process to produce energy. And the fluorspar is used as a fluxing agent to form that protective layer when you produce aluminum and steel to prevent further oxidation. And even further than that, we can go on for hours. And I just came through a conference in Italy. Fluorspar, when it's married with atoms like sulfur, it forms hexafluorosulfide, and that is a highly inert gas that's in your electrical high voltage switches. And then when fluorspar is married to carbon, it forms fluorocarbon, and that is what you use for refrigerant. Again, a highly inert gas that has a very low boiling point, liquid that has a very low boiling point, so that when that liquid is passed through the pipes in the room, it boils in room temperature and absorbs the heat. And when the fluorocarbon exits your room, then that fluorocarbon is compressed to back into liquid, of which then the cycle continues. Fluorocarbon is also used very heavily in solar panels, to produce that inert and protective layer of the critical elements components in the solar panels. Last but not least, actually, a couple more is fluoride is used in modern technologies such as AI. All the NVIDIA chips, TSMC chips require fluorine gas to etch the silicon to the optimal shape, and then etching that silicon onto the wafer. And then when the process is all done, fluorine gas is used to clean up the chambers. So there is hundreds of applications practically in this fluorine industrial complex. And last but not least, I think we should talk a bit more about that, is the recent adoption of electrolyte since the last 15 years in EV vehicles, and as well as in large-scale energy storage, whereby a hexafluorophosphate is used as an electrolyte to carry the lithium and the sodium ions across the anodes and cathodes in your modern day batteries and in these big solar huge energy storage devices to complement solar energy to provide stable baseload.
Well, it really seems like it spans many, if not all, of the hot sectors today, from semiconductors that produce AI chips, solar power, which we need to run the AI and all the data centers, and then the nuclear uranium angle as well as being a key component for the refining of uranium. So it seems like it's a nice one mineral covers a whole basket of different industries, giving you exposure to a whole basket of industries.
Right, Matt, and I want to talk. I think this is a good segue to talk about China. Every time people
Yeah.
talk about critical minerals, people talk about China. And I was just in China this time last year. That's how I get to learn about fluorspar. There is a concerted effort from the Communist Party to acquire and to amass additional fluorspar resources. Even though China is the largest fluorspar producer today, account for 60% of the 10 million tons annual production, but it is running out of fluorspar and is turning into a net importer of fluorspar. That's why you can see the price since the last 2 years has more than up with more than 50%. And today, as we speak, fluorspar price is closing on $600 a ton. So it was barely at crack 250 5 years ago, and it's really embarking on stealthy bull market. It's still early in the running, and let me share with you why, Martin. Fluorspar in the last 5 to 10 years has really found even a greater meaning in life on Earth, and that is the electrolyte. I'm sure some of your investors maybe tune into this AI this AI dilemma or this AI big bandwagon, the storyline. OpenAI recently talked about investing $500 billion with Microsoft, Oracle, and the Saudi family in the Dubai, and the Middle East investors in the United States. What they're talking about is building data centers in order to increase their computing power, in order to basically scrawl and crawl all the information you have on the internet about your birthday, what you like, what is on YouTube, what is trending, and to learn about human behavior. It's like a baby, inquisitive baby that's on a very steep learning curve. And there's obviously trillions of data, trillions of megabytes, terabytes of data that's to be digested. And that's why you're creating all those massive data centers that are scaled in 1 giga. And it's now that these data centers, Martin, are measured in gigawatts, increment, in gigawatt sizable. It's not about number of computer chips. It's about, rightfully so, the amount of power that they consume. So each gigawatt data center will cost about $10 to $15 billion. Just OpenAI talk about investing $500 billion in the next 3 to 5 years. So that will equate to something about 10 to 20 gigawatt powers of data centers. And now you have Gemini, Google, that's coming onto the race. You have XAI, which is Elon Musk, that's doing the same. And you have Anthropic. You have all those AI companies are throwing money on the chips. but the chips are easy to produce, right? They're tiny, and a little guy sells for $50,000. I think we're embarking on a head-on collision, very similar like rare earth today, where China turned off the rare earth magnets, and the United States cannot produce high-tech electronics and weaponry anymore. The data center, each data center gigawatt takes about 3 years to to um, to put together. And so the drive of this data center just started now. They're building 10, 20, maybe I estimate about 30 to 50 gigawatts, 30 to 50 today, gigawatts of these giant data centers. I want to put this in a very specific context because I've been in the power industry for a while. I know the power industry quite well. Is that a typical nuclear power plant takes about 10 years, 5 to 10 years to put together, depending on which jurisdiction you are. Maybe 3 to 5 years in China, 10 years in United States and in UK, because it has to withstand the impact of a 37 since the Fukushima days in Japan. So that's 1 gigawatt of power that would take about 10 years and about $10 billion for a nuclear power plant to put together. Similarly, for coal-fired power plant, it would cost about 1 to 2 billion, about $2 billion today with inflation. And a gigawatt coal power plant would be some of the largest in the world. Usually talk about 600 megawatt a gigawatt. So in order to satisfy, or not just to satisfy, to fulfill, to provide the fuel, the electricity for these huge data centers, you're going to need the size of 50 nuclear power plants. And there has not been one new nuclear power plant in the United States in the last 10 years. There's not been no new coal plants. All the new power today is coming from renewables like solar and wind, which is now the second largest energy source in the United States, more than coal, more than nuclear, just behind natural gas at around 20%. And in order for, well, first of all, solar power, these panels require fluorine gas to texture require fluorocarbon to produce that layer for solar panels, but also requires fluorine gas to texture the silicon, optimize the absorption for the lights. In addition to that, China, and the reason China is becoming a net importer of fluorspar is they're building 30 to 50 gigawatts of energy storage. Their energy storage and solar power production went up more than 50% on an annual basis in the last 5 years, because they quickly realized that this combination of solar power and the energy storage, whether it's lithium or sodium, is the only source of fast energy to provide that base load. And that's why China is running out of fluorspar. It has less than 7 years of fluorspar left in China, whereas it's over 50 years of rare earth reserves and resources in China. And therefore, I would contend to say that fluorspar is even a more compelling investment than rare earth, because China is competing with the likes of the United States, Germany, Japan, Korea, the rest of Europe. Anybody you think that manufacture AI chips, robotics, solar panels, uranium enrichment for weaponry or for energy production, and driving EVs all require fluorine. And this situation is not being alleviated, as I mentioned. About 2 to 5 years from now, as you're turning on the switches of these huge, massive data centers, they're going to realize that emperor has no clothes, that there is no juice to feed into these plants. And that's why that's why I came on a number of shows when we acquired the first project in July last year. I said, this is the best investment opportunities in my 25 years of career in mining in the fluorspar space. There are only two companies we can talk about later, but the CleanTech has share price has gone up quite a bit, but it's nowhere from what I see to reach its maximum potential.
One of the things with rare earths that China has been willing to do is there are rare earths aren't that rare, as I think most people know now. But what it is it's a very dirty and complicated process to refine it. And a lot of countries were just happy, fine, China, you do all that dirty work. We're happy to do that. The refining and processing of fluorspar, what is that like? Is that a relatively simple process, or explain what it takes from the mined mineral into a sellable product? What does that require?
The process to process the fluorspar out of the ground into a marketable product, like you said, is very well known, and it's very similar to flotation of galena and of sphalerite of sulfide materials to extract silver and gold and copper, for example. Specifically, when you dig fluorspar out of the ground, it's also called fluoride. The chemical composition is calcium fluoride, so that's CaF2. When the CaF2 coming out of the ground, usually the grades are arranged between 10% to 60%. Averaging around the world is at around 40 to 50%. So when this CaF2 come out of the ground, let's just say is at a 50% grade. When you the acceptable quality for a met spar, which is the fluorspar you chuck into a met plant or steel manufacture plant to create that protective layer, is at around 85%. And the hydrofluoric acid plant that takes fluorspar and produce hydrofluoric acid, of which in turn then HF, hydrofluoric acid, is then feeding to the uranium plant and the semiconductor plants and the refrigerant plant and the electrolyte battery plant, energy storage plant. So that fluorspar requires a grade of 95% plus of CaF2. And then and then what the CF2 then would the way to produce HF, the hydrofluoric acid, is to react CF2 with sulfuric acid to get the F out of the Ca and then marry the F with the H. The way to concentrate the CaF2 out of the ground into high-grade CaF2 from 10 to 50% to up to 90% is conventional flotation, like you would do with the sulfide of silver in Mexico, or sulfide or copper or gold from Highland Valley in British Columbia, or from Battle Mountain region for gold in Nevada. So you will grind it into a powdery form, and then you would apply a very specific chemical agent, and then from there the foam will be captured. The CF2 be captured in the foam in the top layer, on which you collect that, and you rinse and repeat that process until you get the desired grade. Interestingly, the chemical required actually is quite friendly to get the fluorspar upgraded is bark tree. It's the oil extract coming from the trees in South Africa, and as well
Oh,
as in
wow.
Louisiana. So that's something we learned. Overall, it's a relatively benign process, hydrological process. Doesn't require heating or pressurization.
Okay, so I think we've done a good job of looking at the market and the general dynamics. And I guess, I don't know, I think it's maybe implied, but I don't know if we've directly addressed it. It is deemed a critical mineral by the US government, correct? It's not just, quote, critical mineral. It is designated as such, and the government is putting emphasis on it, correct?
Not only is government putting emphasis on it, the CleanTech has been invited, contacted by the U.S. government agency, inquiring about the timeline and how the government can provide assistance to bring domestic fluorspar production as soon as possible in order to meet those mission critical applications in energy production, energy storage, in semiconductors, in militaries, and in day-to-day household requisites like refrigerant. Um, there, in addition to bring the government being sort of the attention being brought on the government and the awareness being brought up, the government, the DLA, which is the Department of Logistics Agency, that's the government procurement arm, has started to stockpile, issue tenders to recreate fluorspar stockpile again. That stockpile was sold, I believe, in the early 90s. And that's when the Chinese flooded the fluorspar market in the 70s and 80s with their cheap fluorspar, and the US production of fluorspar subsequently stopped in the late 70s and early 80s. And then Chinese and then you remember in the early 90s, Martin, we're going into this digital era. We don't commodities are thing of a barbaric relic, and we don't need it anymore. So they get rid of all the strategic stockpiles, and now they are restarting that stockpile again. Started around $50 million, recall, but I think they recently upsized that to $200 million of rebuilding that strategic stockpile for fluorspar. And that is, Martin, at the insistence of industry participants. And the reason I think this is a good slide to talk about that is United States industrial consumers, whether it's chemical or nuclear or battery plants that Elon Musk is building, or LG and Mitsubishi are building in Kentucky, in Louisiana, in Carolina, in Michigan, is they cannot find fluorspar that's not from China. And even China is curtailing its production of or exporting of its fluorspar. You can see the map clearly. That not only is China controlling 60% of the world fluorspar supply, it's also controlling nearly all this Mongolian fluorspar production. And we know one two thing about Mongolia. When I went to Mongolia, all the fluorspars are taken by the largest Chinese chemical companies. So then, if you were to Google where is United States getting its fluorspar, where is Germany getting its fluorspar, where is Korea getting its fluorspar, where is Japan getting its fluorspar, there's only one answer. It's Mexico. You see Mexico right there. Anywhere else, nobody else is even close a distance in the league table. And Mexico, so the interesting phenomenon, as I was telling you, that fluorspar market has reached an inflection point of which I believe is going to be entering into an exponential rise from today, is that Mexican fluorspar used to carry a discount up to 20 to 30% to Chinese fluorspar in order to attract the US consumers, given its geological proximity. That gap, that discount has all but evaporated. And sometimes the Mexican fluorspar actually trades at a premium to the Chinese fluorspar now, because Mexico doesn't need to play this game anymore, given that China is no longer a competitor, that they're buying fluorspar from Africa and elsewhere. That just shows you how acute the situation is. And I believe that in not too distant future, you're going to see fluorspar on the center page, where the United States is not only actively eager to secure supply domestically, but be going out there hunting for fluorspar like it did for rare earth in Australia. And interestingly and funny enough, this Kentucky Fluorspar District, of which we're going to talk about in just a couple of minutes, is one of the largest fluorspar district in the world. And the U.S. Geological Survey bucketed or printed 2 million tons of resources of fluorspar from the United States. We believe the number is at least 10 times that in just this district that has supplied over 90% of the fluorspar in the United States up to the 70s and through the World War II, when that fluorspar is used to produce weaponry in steel and aluminum.
The discount that Mexico had previously on its fluorspar, had it anything to do, like, was it a different grade or quality, or was it just and is the difference between higher quality and lower quality the matter of just a better refining and processing, and can it be sort of fixed, or is there something inherently with sort of lower quality fluorspar that keeps it at a lower price and then possibly excluded from higher value, maybe some higher value applications?
Very relevant questions. Mexican fluorspar carried a discount because it carries a very heavy arsenic. And
Ah,
and any company, as you know, if you have high arsenic to liters content, even for gold and copper and silver, you're going to get penalized for that, because you have to retrofit your smelter and your refineries to account for additional environmental protection. So that fluorspar has very high arsenic that's not suitable for majority of these hydrofluoric acid plants,
gotcha.
and as also the disposal of arsenic is very problematic, and that's why the largest U.S. Fluorspar processing facilities, the hydrofluoric acid plants, they have modules that can handle arsenic. But now, because
Okay.
U.S. has limited choices in procuring fluorspar elsewhere, that even with fluorspar carrying high arsenic contents are getting very little discount, if nothing at all. But in
Okay.
terms of your other questions, in terms of technology to upgrade your fluorspar out of the ground into higher grade fluorspar to be sold, obviously the fluorspar coming out of this district was compatible with the chemical users and industrial users in the US because they have bought this fluorspar before and that worked. The magic numbers I mentioned to you is around 85% for met spar, which is metallurgical spar, which is for aluminum and steel. I think they're less picky about it. But they, in terms of the composition of the delicious element, but they're very particular about the sizing of their met spar because you want to have chunky spars. You cannot have loose, powdery spar. As you are throwing into the furnace, the things are going to blow wide open if you just have the fluorspar in powdery form. But for acid spar, its grades are highly relevant. You got to be in the 90s. And then then if your end destination is, for example, the electrolyte plant, then they can further impose on additional aluminum, iron, and other, because you're talking battery grade
Yeah.
hydrofluoric acid, which you can get in very, very particular, so down to 0.1% of different elements, limits in those elements. Usually, then the question is, what can make a fluorspar flow to 95% versus 80% versus 50%? I think that is really resorts to a metallurgist. Obviously, there is a positive correlation between the recovery and the fluorspar grade out of the ground, but they're not entirely have R equal to 1. I think depends on how dirty and how sort of intertwined, how refractory these CaF2 is to other elements, whether they're in the same crystals, whether they have a lot of silicate contents, etc. That's why it makes fluorspar quite unique across the spectrum, kind of like silver, really no different from silver and gold and copper.
I think we've covered this part of the conversation well. I'd like to get into your projects, the properties, and the tremendous amount of acres you've acquired and optioned at this point in the U.S. here. So you've been busy. You've been picking up a lot of land here. Tell us about it.
Well, you see my gray hair. But you know what? I want to thank our team for just pulling in tireless hours. The first acquisition was in July, about 5 months ago, and that's after months of study and contacting local people. We received assistance also from the likes from many stakeholders and local. So it's really truly a team effort. But as of today, 5 months from our first acquisition in July of 2025, and having studied fluorspar for just over a year, CleanTech has consummated, I believe, 5 separate transactions with third parties, and today already control, as you said, over 17,000 acres of mineral rights, fluorspar in this district, in this Illinois Kentucky district, which supplied over 90% of historical fluorspar production in the US. And 17,000 acres for some of your matrix audience in Europe and in Canada is more than the size of Manhattan. And these are just not random pickings. There are about 20 different distinct deposits, all with historically documented occurrence, drill holes, surface sampling, or even production histories of fluorspar that are sitting on strategically located in all the major mineral fluorspar trends. The Kentucky-Illinois district measures at around 25 miles by 25-mile stretch. So you're looking at around a 600 square mile area. That's a very big area, and of which CleanTech's area under CleanTech's control is at around 10 to 15% of that total area coverage. But at this point, there are just about all major mineral trends and faults are under CleanTech's control, one way or the other. So either we spoil somebody else's party, or somebody else is going to spoil our party in terms of checking off all the boxes of a particular deposit per se. The total resources, documented historical resources, in those 17,000 acres measures to today at close to 10 million tons. I want to absolutely preface, and you can see on the right-hand side that the measuring of these resources, the calculation of the resources are historical in standards. The drill holes and the measuring and the grading system may differ. QA, QC, QP are different than versus today. Some of the drill holes are maybe up to 100 years ago. But looking at these on the cross sections, there are digitized by hand drawings and on typewriters. And internally, we're assess the situation. We're very confident that we at least have that, if not maybe can even multiply that by factors because the areas are still very heavily underexplored in the 17,000 Manhattan-sized areas of which we have under our control. I would even venture to say that I'm 51 going on 52 in my lifetime. We're not able to do these areas justice. I mean, you're talking Union Square, Manhattan, Central Park, Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Chelsea area, the Meat District, and then the I mean, it is
It's a good-sized
humongous area.
island.
We just made a site visit there. I mean, it is huge. You have abandoned shafts, tailings area, waste areas. They're fluorspar all over the place. And so we have a lot of homework to do. And but suffice to say that we are right now one of the major player of fluorspar in domestic fluorspar in the United States. Currently, there's no domestic fluorspar production of any meaningful quality. And anybody who's contemplating a nuclear enrichment company or a Tesla, LG's, all the fluorochemical companies that produce solar panels, energy storage, refrigerant, your pharmaceutical pills, and agriculture, all of that will have to be looking into this area. And the reason I know that, the Alcoas, the steel makers, because they had bought from the area 50, 100 years ago. It's all well documented, Martin. And now we're just doing a revisit to the known. And the stars you see are the areas that CleanTech controls. The red is the Illinois side, and the black is the Kentucky side. It's separated by what you see that the Ohio River. It's not quite clear because the map is black and white. I also want to just share with your audience that there's a lot of crosses you can see in the Illinois side. And so majority of the production in this district come from Illinois, probably more than 80% of that, or maybe up to 90%. And that's why we're focusing a lot of our initial acquisition in the Kentucky side. And the reason is because Illinois in early days were better consolidated and packaged and owned by large major industry companies. So whereas ownership in the South in Kentucky is more segregated and more fragmented. So what we're doing, Martin, is more than anything else is to consolidate the district and start not only consolidate the mineral rights, we're literally knocking door to door. That's what we're doing. And not only consolidate the mineral rights, but also consolidate all the information. We're going into somebody else's garage, like somebody's driller who was retired 20 years ago, pulling in their files, digitizing them. And then if there are numbers, then we have to hire we'll have to hire people, article students, to start writing literally manually, right? All the tables into an Excel sheet format, and we'll consolidate it. It is a tremendous amount of work that's being undertaken right now. And so it's truly exciting, and this district will be the chapter will be rewritten, and the production will resume sometime in the future. And we have a lot of staying power, and we're going to be one of the major. We're destined, and we're aiming for us being one of the major player in the district.
Of the over, call it 17,000 acres, a lot of that I believe is optioned. And there it sounds like you did a lot of work putting together a lot of packages and so forth. So can you give us some sense of what does it take to get full control of those packages from the initial option phase on it? Do you have to do a certain amount of work or write some checks? Are there how does that acquisition process work?
Yeah, Martin, I can tell you, but I have to kill you.
Okay.
No, I think first of all, I just want to this map really do audience justice in that you can see the scale. Here's the 6 mile for that little label
Yeah.
there. So they have to measure the stretch out to the entire section, right? You're looking at around 25 miles by 25 miles. What you mentioned is only partially correct. There's some mineral rights are being auctioned, but they're not a class A, what we rank A, B, C. They're usually the B's and the C's. And
Okay.
all the class A mineral rights are and I also want to be clear that the mineral rights with documented exploration, drilling, or historical production history have all been they're not available by auction. So, like for example, right, you can see this map. This is called the Rose Clear. Can you see that? So this
Yep.
Rose Clear is one of the major production area in the past, and then so there are some mineral rights here in the north we acquire, and then also in the tail end. You can see that, right? And also we
Mhm.
speculated that extends behind across the Ohio River into Kentucky side. So we did a lot of homework to acquire the rights of the extension of what we believe Rose Clear extension up and down
Okay.
the parcels. So this is another area called Stewart District. Again, there's a lot of historical production, and then we secure the top portion and the bottom portion. In the Kentucky side, the red dots are known drill holes, and so this is CleanTech compiling historic information and partially with the assistance of some maps are publicly available to have to study the maps carefully and to go after the lowest hanging fruits. And then after that, Martin will have to knock door to door, kind of hear from the grapevine of who owns what, and then establish contacts with them. Some are willing to sell, some are not. Some has, its process has to go through. And so there's not like a one bullet magic formula of which is, you show up at this district, you say, show me the best you got, right? This is not like an a la carte. You go on and just say, I want to order this and this and that. And there is still a lot of homework to do. There's still a lot of there's still some great assets, good assets to be had. And so our M&A era is not quite over, but it's coming. It's coming. This M&A trail is coming to sort of a winding down phase as we embarking on development.
And so could one expect that in the next, let's say by midway through next year, I guess, like you started, I think you said your first acquisition in July, I believe you said. So within
Yes.
12 months of your first acquisition, you should be largely finished this consolidation process?
Yes, I would say we're about 85% of the way through, looking at just the map that you do.
Yeah.
I also want to mention briefly about the potential for rare earth and trace element discoveries. Some of your audience might have made some money on rare earth and germanium and gallium. Hickstone, you can see the map here. This is arguably the largest rare earth deposit in the United States. It's not well marketed. It's a privately held company by private individuals who does not live in the United States, who is not a U.S. person. But this is a very big. Hickstone is estimated to contain, based on public literature, up to 60 million tons of heavy rare earth resources, along with fluorspar as a byproduct. So you can see that we have made a lot of homework. We've done a lot of homework, Martin, including able to manage to acquire some of the parcels in the heart, literally in the heart of rare earth deposits. Unfortunately, we put out that news release when the market was when the critical minerals mining so the universe is going through a bit of correction. So we didn't get as much exposure or as much mileage as we did on the news releases in the news release when it came out not only a month ago. But I want to bring that attention to your audience very, very clear. And I think there is analogous to Hickstone on the other side of the Ohio River. It's almost like Hickstone's twin. And it's called Big Four, of which we own a lot of the claims. So we speculate that we might have a rare earth discovery in the making from our existing claims, but that is yet to be known. To answer your questions, yes, we are now getting over the thrill of M&As and just like looking at ourselves in awe of what we have done so far. But the next phase we're already started working through the Christmas holiday is working every day, hours of the day, looking at the data, consolidate the data. I think the data consolidation phase is also coming to a close by the early part of next year. And then from there is picking prioritizing and ranking maybe one or two deposits to expedite and accelerate those assets into production. And that we just had a very long conversation with our independent geologists and QPs and our geological team. It is art and science, Martin, because it's a combination of the quality of the project based on the grades, the accessibility of the project based on the depth and the distribution of the minerals, the consistency of the minerals, any documentation of metallurgical histories and off-taker history, so we know we can go back to the same customers that we had before. And and uh, and last but not least, is service rights because we own the mineral rights, and Kentucky has a separate service rights. It's not as arduous as say Mexico, because Kentucky law clearly stated that the mineral rights trumps the service rights. But it's a very heavy undertaking in terms of contacting service rights owners and share with them our vision, our production, and about fluorspar. And we already contacted a few that are very welcome and they're very open-minded because it is a historical fluorspar district. It doesn't have any other critical industries. It's not up for much tourism. It's just not a lot going on there. And so I think we're very fortunate to be exploring the district, and a lot of that work in publishing data, resources, 43101, JORC, feasibility, metallurgical, all of that is being evaluated. But I think first of all, just like if you're gonna buy a condo, right, or building in Manhattan, you gotta know where you're gonna go, and it's not just location, 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 because all these areas is what infrastructure with power and water.
So I guess to simplify that is in Q1, let's say, we'll get some news from you saying what your priority targets are and what the next steps. And given that they seem to be historic resources, that the next phase, once you set your priorities, you have to pull out some drills and start confirming historic resources and then putting together an initial putting together your resource estimate, figure out where there's area for new discoveries, and because you do have a big land package here, so you've got to really put together set priorities and put together a plan.
And we're very fortunate some of the public available information from KGS and from ISGS, which is the Illinois State Geological Survey and Kentucky Geological Survey. And it resides in University of Illinois and University of Kentucky. And these geological surveys, part of U.S. Geological Survey, has digitized
Yeah.
quite a lot of information. So we were able to access that and compile that as part of our database. So you're right. I think in early part of next year, not only are we going to move forward and telegraph of our plan and provide a bit of a timeline in how and when and in which project we're going to fast track into production, but also, Martin, share with the audience of some of our findings, right? Further qualify some of those findings that we are more than just a number, like, okay, Chemical Crosser is 800,000 tons, or TAP is 2 million tons. Not just more than a number, but we have sort of thoroughly went through the data information so we can cite maybe some of the metallurgical reports, some of the historic production numbers and who they were sold to, and some of the specific geological characteristics of these minerals, so we can better understand the recovery process to adopt and the potential sort of thresholds in the end product, in the final quality product that can be achieved. So it'd be a fairly clear roadmap that we're going to lay out and share with the audience on how we can bring this project, how we can bring the district back into production.
So Q1 is yeah, we'll get a lot of news from you in Q1. You've raised some money recently. How much runway do you have? And with an exploration development company, it's always when is the next raise and so forth. So how far can your current balance sheet take you? And I guess ideally you get to the point where you can show some interesting, exciting news, and then presumably raise some money off the back of that. What is the general, how much do you think you're going to need to raise, and what's the general plan there?
The lucky thing, Martin, is Kentucky, Illinois. They're almost non-existent in claims fees. So the
Okay, that's
company
good.
has just under $1 million Canadian in the bank. The monthly burn rate is at around 150,000 Canadian per month. It's quite modest because we share the office with Silver Elephant, of which I'm the CEO. So a lot of the
Yeah,
timeshares are a team are timeshare. One team taking care of two companies. Um, so on that basis, the company has at least 6 months of working capital. However, does not taking into account the programs that will be laid out in early part of next year. So I think maybe a time to raise will be after some of those development plan is announced. And
for
also
sure.
not taking into plan of additional acquisition that may be in the works. And usually these payments are spread out in a sort of a 2 to 4 year period with a very light payment upfront. In terms of revenue, and not just private placement, but the company has stayed sort of dormant with this vanadium project in the past year. So there are some lower price warrants and options that are coming in at around $1,000 per month, and that's why the price is trading at this right now. There are some sellers at this price around 17 cents range, and these exercise price are six to 10 cents. So there's no imminent need to raise money, and we
Okay.
want to make sure that we get the next phase of this project development out in the open. And one
Yeah.
of the major things I like to do, Martin, we talk about M&A, we talk about project development, is investor awareness. In that US is always the last to come to the scene in terms of investment interest in critical minerals. I mean, evidenced by rare earth. I mean, that project is $10 billion being recycled twice out of bankruptcy. Even lithium, right? There's a lot of lithium stories back in the early 2014, 2015 that went bankrupt. The to be known that the fluorspar projects in Australia and in Mongolia are selling a heavy premium to the Kentucky fluorspar today. So my job is to bridge that valuation at around 2 to 3x. So I think there's a lot of work to do to get the interest level up, not just in terms of company specific developments in the district, but also just to bring the investment case for fluorspar to the North American audience, of which there are only two companies in listed in the US that has exposure to North American fluorspar.
So 2026 is going to be quite a year for you. We'll get a lot of information and then plans on what your next steps are. I guess it's really too hard at this point, we're still quite early stage to estimate like how many meters of drilling you would maybe need to do, and that would all be some of the data that you'd be able to put out in Q1.
Yeah, Martin, I think this is a good example. If I may share a couple of slides on some of the project that we liken the most within the
Please.
areas that we control. So
Yeah.
Kimber Crosser is a classic example of the value that CleanTech adds to you as a shareholder. So we started Kimber Crosser as a dot. So that project was the first available, which we acquired. That has about
Yeah.
800,000 tons. And then we studied the map. We said, whoa, Rosy Clear. Remember we talked earlier, mentioned to you, this is one of the major production centers in Illinois, across from the Ohio River. So we speculated that this area, the mineralization actually extends, and not only extend, but expand south of Kentucky. So we take the time, we not only will first acquire Kimber Crosser, and then just a month in July and in September, we acquired the Coron, which is 7,000-acre area. That is the green channel that you see. So 7,000 acre, we control majority of this area. It's called the Carswell Corridor. And this area has a lot of drill holes you also see in the red. So I think for the first time in maybe 40 or 50 years that since Campbell Crossing was somehow detached, separated from Coron, that we are reuniting the two projects together, which they ought to be. And then that we are rekindling or writing the chapter of Rose Clear, not from going back to where it was mine before, but going after that extension. So we only not have the tail end, we also have the front end, right? You saw the map earlier before. So that's a very good example of the work that we're doing, that we're systematically evaluating and picking on the lowest hanging fruits and consolidating the most essential or the best projects in this district. So this is the tab deposit in the southern part of the Kentucky. This is this is probably the largest area. Over 100, I think around 117 drill holes were drilled, most recently by Honeywell. That's one of the major four chemical company and nuclear operator in the United States.
Yes.
So they spend millions of dollars in drilling this tab area, which has extended production history. And they choose to walk away in 2015 because the Mexicans offered a very sweet deal. And the Honeywell said, I'm not into this strategic vertical in supply chain management. I'm just not into that right now. And you can see this is a lot of documented production histories, and this is just the tab area is over 7 miles strike. And so this is another project that we believe is very, very attractive to be accelerated for production versus Chemical Crosser. Obviously, there's some pros and cons. We like Chemical Crosser a bit more because the grades are higher and the district is also huge. And we like TAP also a lot because it has modern exploration and drilling, which increases the confidence level. And it's also very shallow, but the grades are lower, Martin. And so this is dichotomy. This is the Pandora
Yeah.
box that we're in right now. Um,
There's always a trade-off. Yeah. There's always a trade-off.
I think rest assured that we're working with some of the best geologists in the industry that I come across in the last 25 years in this industry. Bill Pincus is an advisor. He is absolutely terrific. I think he's the founder of Esperanza that was acquired by Alamos or some of the larger mining companies. He's made several silver discoveries in the past, and Bill Pincus is salivating on the district just like me. So he is providing a lot of assistance in guiding us in this expanding data room, in really giving us some precision uh, execution, which is what's needed. Because you could be like a kid in the Wonderland, wandering around doing your site tour in Manhattan and not knowing what to do. And so there is time that we're sharpening our pencil and we're going into some very surgical plan that would be shared with your audience in the new year.
We are almost at an hour here, and we need to wrap this up. You gave us a lot of good information. Just some final thoughts to leave viewers with here as what they should, how to put this into context. And then we've talked a little bit about some catalysts or goals that you have for the coming year. So just maybe put a bow on it, so to speak, and wrap it up here.
Yeah, let me give it a sort of a 2 minute closing pitch. I think first of all, like I said, I've been in the mining industry. I'm most excited about fluorspar next to silver, which we can talk about another day. And it's very much like it's a replay. I see this identical replay of lithium, and I see identical replay, deja vu of rare earth that people don't know about all of a sudden until people goes, a cliff right there, until the US faces a cliff. And it's, I got to act, I can act now. And they're putting billions of dollars. In fact, fluorspar is more bullish. Fundamentals are even better because there is so much lithium in South America, in Bolivia, in Argentina. There's so much rare earth in China and elsewhere. The supply is not the issue, it's the recovery and processing. But there's not enough fluorspar, and fluorspar is indispensable because it is most reactive element, as I mentioned to you. There's no substitute for fluorspar in electrolyte, in nuclear, in semiconductors. So I think that's the investment thesis. First of all, in its investment case. Martin, in terms of some of the valuation matrix, our peers in Australia are trading at $300 million valuation, pre-production stage, no infrastructure, requires hundreds of millions of dollars to put a mine into production, with a very similar endowment of fluorspar as our holding. And so obviously, albeit they're maybe more advanced with feasibility studies and whatnot, but our market cap right now is at around 30 million Canadian. We went to 100 not even 2 months ago. And I think there's still a lot of upside just to catch up to our peers. The capex to production is not going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars range. If you start a 500 ton per day flotation plant like you do in Mexico, and how some of the many junior companies started out like First Majestics and Fortuna Silver, like Silvercorp, you don't need an arm and a leg to put that mine into production. The company
Yeah.
has 140 million shares outstanding, excellent share structure. Silver Elephant and some institution insiders own 60 million shares, 60 million shares. So there's 40% of the shares are closely held. And the company already churned out the entire float of 80 million shares in the last 5 months. So that just tells me
Okay.
some of the early people already, some of the early guys that got into the 7 cents, 8 cents already gone. And some of the guys that maybe came in too early, or some of the warrant option holder already gone, and we're leveling at these prices. And that as we bring on more awareness of Fluorspar to the investment community, as the company lays out its investment plan in project development plan in the new year, that we could be embarking on a new plateau, a new level from where we are.
John, thank you very much for joining us and teaching us about Fluorspar and the opportunities you have there. So thank you very much. I look forward to getting you back and getting an update as things move forward. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.